Andrea, thanks so much for joining me on the Vantage Point Podcast. First of all, how are you?
I'm excited.
You specialize in strength training and flexibility, but I couldn't help but notice on your Instagram you spend a lot of time upside down. Could you talk to me about some of the benefits of training in the way you do, and what are the benefits of doing handstands in general?
I do strength training and flexibility training, but I'd always wanted to do a handstand, like always, always, always. And I think everything just ties in so well and so nicely because for handstands you require strength work as well and some conditioning. So a lot of people don't realize how much of it's shoulder work. So getting your shoulders really strong and your traps really strong as well, and the compression strength that ties in like really nicely with the flexibility. So I think everything just like goes together, and just having that awareness for your own body being upside down, having your brain thinking upside down is a completely different world. So I think it definitely, it's very mental. So once you strong, everything else is like very mental, and it's a very different journey that you would go on with like typical strength training.
Yeah.
But once you establish a good foundation with that, then like you're good to go, and then everything else is like very mental. And I think what you get out of practicing handstands is something special that I would recommend anyone to do.
Interesting. So you're talking to someone who can barely do a cartwheel. So this is quite quite an interesting take to hear. But I imagine when you're in the top of a handstand, it's a very similar position to how you would be in like when you catch an Olympic lift, the overhead squat position. I imagine it's a lot of the same muscles you're working there, and it's more of a calisthenic way of training those muscles, like you say, your
Yeah,
traps
definitely a lot
and
of
your
it is,
delts.
yeah, upper body, traps, shoulders. Once you have that stable foundation there, then little adjustments from like the hips and things like that, everything like comes into place, especially if your goal is eventually to get like a nice line, because you can balance and it can look like a banana, still a handstand because you're still balancing, right? But if one of your
Mm.
goals is to get that line, then little adjustments, being aware of your pelvis, just a lot of body awareness as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that just something you wanted to do then, just for the curiosity of how it would feel?
Yeah, I just wanted to be honest. Most of my journeys have been, oh, I want to do that. That's cool. I want to do it. That's how I started my flexibility journey. It was kind of like, I want to be able to do the splits. I want to be able to get my back bridge like that. And it just went from there, to be honest. It's just curiosity. It wasn't like I didn't have like a specific goal. It wasn't for like any sports or anything like that. It was just I want to do it, and let's see what happens. And throughout that, my handstand started developing, but I still wanted to do it. Before that, I had wanted to do it. I'd seen like people do it, and then I was like, that's something that I really, really want to do one day. And now there's me upside down.
For people who maybe have just come across you as a trainer or just seen your page, like they might assume that you're just someone who's naturally flexible, who's always been able to do the splits, always been able to do a handstand. But actually, you
Yeah,
didn't have a sporting background, and that's taken a lot of time and energy for you to get to that point, and a lot of work. And I think if people probably if they scroll back through your feed, they can see the early stages of that. At least I could see a slight progression from the start of when you started posting videos. I did have a quick scroll down just to see what your handstands used to look like, and they're definitely not quite the same as they are now. I've seen you talk about like
yeah.
taking ownership of your body and taking ownership of your health and fitness. What do you mean when you say that? And why should people strive to take ownership of their health journey?
I think as a coach and as a PT, I've always wanted to be able to help people long term, not just the short term. You might have like a goal, short term goals in terms of like the typical weight loss and like muscle building goals. But apart from that, I've always been wanting to just help people build those habits for them to be sustainable in the long term, for them eventually to have to make better informed decisions, and to eventually have the required tools that they need to just for them to take ownership, because I can't expect my clients to be with me forever, and I just don't want them to eventually go and be like, oh, still as clueless, because they will only come into the session for the sake of coming to the session, right? I only having someone do the work and knowing what they're doing. So yes, in the long term is people being able to take ownership of their health and their fitness, and all the different factors that play around that as well, which is very like psychological and things like that.
Yeah, people have all sorts of different obstacles, don't they? And I noticed an obstacle you faced was you said you had I've seen anyway in one of your posts, you said you had like an imbalance. Is that an imbalance in flexibility or an imbalance in strength? And what did you do to overcome that?
I think it started when I was younger. I wasn't like a very active child or anything. I always knew that like I had it in me, but it was just my circumstances didn't allow me to just be someone that did sports or things like that. I always had this pain on my left side. It would go down. It would start from my shoulder, go down like my hip, basically my QL, and sometimes it would go down my leg. And I always had that. And every time I would like feel any stress or anything that was going on in my life, that side would like flare up. So I think when I started doing more like resistance stuff, things like squatting and like deadlifting were really hard for me. So I stopped doing that for a while, knowing that I eventually wanted to get to it, and just took a step back, worked on more like machines and things like that that would take like the stability element out of it, because it was just the stability like in my hips was hard for me. And then from then with the flexibility, it changed. I think it just changed a lot of things, because with flexibility you work on like specific joints and smaller muscles, the more specific muscles. And I think strengthening those areas in my hips, like if you want to do the splits, you're gonna have to like get pretty strong in your hips, even if it's the side split or like a pancake or a front split. You need to have the mobility and the flexibility and the strength in your hips to get you to those places. So it like forced me to work on those imbalances. But I mean, everyone can be different, right? For me, I'd had it since I was young. I have it now every now and then, but it's nowhere near how it used to be. So it's made a massive difference. And just my attitude towards it when it comes up, I'm like, okay, what's going on in my life? Because usually something's going on that it's starting to feel out. So it makes me address that and think about it, instead of just like dealing with it and like ignoring it. And so yeah.
Yeah, so obviously you have a lot of knowledge now when it comes to training and all this kind of stuff, but how would someone who doesn't have your kind of knowledge and background, how would they identify if they have an imbalance? Would they even know? And what could like the average person do to overcome something like that?
So to be completely honest with you, I wouldn't really focus on that, especially if you're starting out. I think if you focus too much on what's wrong with you, it makes you feel like you're broken. Because when, let's say I wanted to address my issue, I would go, let's say, on social media or start some scrolling, and then I would just feel like I'm broken. I would feel like, my hip is higher than the other one and things like that. And it wasn't until I got a better understanding around it is when I discovered my chiropractor. And he was like, there's no issue. Like, for the majority of people, like, balances are very natural. If it's something that's like a bit more chronic being as in like you've been exposed to it for a longer amount of time, then I think it's not thinking of yourself as you're being broken, but thinking of different elements like, okay, probably I'm not moving enough, or then maybe the way I deal with things is not the best way when it comes to things like stress. So stress management is like super important. How work life, how's like home life, social life, all those things have a massive impact, because ultimately those things that you feel is just your brain telling you like something's not okay. And sometimes that's a good sign. Pain is like, without pain, like, well, like, we wouldn't know if something would be wrong. So I think Yeah, I think for most people start with, don't look at the mirror and look for imbalances. We're not perfect. We're not completely perfect from this side to that side, right? We're not completely asymmetrical. Is it symmetrical? We are asymmetrical, not symmetrical.
Yeah.
If it's something that you've always wanted to do, just start doing it. If if you don't enjoy running at the moment, don't do it. So if it's not something that's going to motivate you to continue,
Yeah.
just find something that you enjoy doing, whatever it is, and do it for long enough, then you can find something else and then focus on that. But yeah, I think too many people focus on like imbalances or things like that. I spoke about my one because it's my own personal like experience, which is something that I had for quite a big amount of like me growing up that impacted me as well. But it wasn't just like, oh, I did this specifically. No, it was so many things. It was managing like just my life and
Mm.
knowing the right exposure of like exercise to give myself when like I needed that.
Yeah. There's a fellow you and I both know, Coach Eugene Teo, and I've seen
Yes.
him talk about this, and he gave a great example where he's using a leg press machine, and he shows how his feet don't line up perfectly straight like this, like most people's
Yeah.
feet would, or how you would expect to put your feet, or you'd intentionally try and place your feet straight like that. And he shows how he has one foot straight and one foot just slightly off to the side because just the way his stance is and the way his body's made, it's
Yeah.
just more beneficial to him. He's in a more powerful position to press that way. And at some point, you've just got to find what works for you, don't you?
What works for you and what feels comfortable for you. I find that sometimes a lot of when I do my one-to-ones with clients, when they start, they look at me to replicate exactly what I'm doing. And I always like to remind them, uh, this is what feels comfortable for me. You don't have to completely replicate exactly where my arms are, where my grip is at, everything. And then I say to them, it's up to you to explore and find what feels comfortable like for you with things like a dumbbell chest press. Like the angle of your elbow could vary like some degrees. The grip for some people is a bit more
Yeah.
narrow, some people's a bit more up there. So I always say you need to be able to just explore and find what works for you and for your body type.
Yeah, you're talking a lot about resistance training here. I wonder how much, I'm sure you can speak on this. How much has flexibility affected your strength, and how much in reverse, how much is practicing resistance training improved your flexibility, and does it improve flexibility? Maybe training through a full range of motion, does that sort of thing help?
100%. I think it also depends on what you want to focus on as well. If you want to get, for example, your shoulders more flexible, training those ranges that you wouldn't normally train and exposing them over a longer period of time, the more access you have to range, then you can over time just strengthen that. So ultimately, thinking of seeing flexibility and strength training as the same thing, it's just because it's sometimes smaller muscles or more specific areas in the joints, you don't require as much load to it. So it makes for me personally and for my clients, it makes like a big difference, especially with like the fear mongering around like oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're gonna hurt your back doing that and things like that. So I think it's exposing people to these different positions that our bodies were designed to do. And when you start strengthening that, then you go into, let's say you were going into something more let's say more body composition goals more than flexibility. Always having an element of that I think is 100% like always useful. You definitely see like the difference in it as well because your body's able to access more range and you're able to load that up more access.
Yeah.
Just means you're going to be able to stimulate your muscle more effectively and ultimately helping you get more body composition goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people they think the only way to get more flexible is spending hours a week just stretching. But if you're not challenge yourself in those fully extended positions,
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to do anything in those fully extended positions. You know, at some point you need to start challenging the muscles within that
yeah,
new extended range of motion that you now have access to. Otherwise,
100%.
what's the point? What's the benefit if you can't use that extra freedom of mobility that you've got
Yeah,
for yourself?
use it for your advantage. And as you would do with any other exercise, just progressively overload, add some load. Once you know you can get the amount of reps you wanted to get, then you wouldn't stay in the same reps forever, like with your back squat. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Some people do.
You progress. Well, some people do, which
Yeah.
still doesn't make any sense. But it's like ultimately you want to get stronger in those ranges, then okay, your brain has adapted and it's made the adaptations in your body, but now it needs a new stimulus. It needs the right amount of stress, because ultimately, it's stress you're being exposed to. You give it the right amount, then your body will adapt to it like effectively.
What would you say is are some of the main benefits of people thinking about their joint health? Because so many people they're focused on getting big muscles, getting as strong as they can get, looking a certain way.
Yeah.
But a lot of people neglect their joints. And yeah, tell me about some of the benefits you found, or some of the benefits you think you'll see maybe into your later years from looking after your joints.
It's really important, especially for your later years, and simple things as like, being able to catch a fall or something like that. Um, Having the like stability like in your knees and or in your shoulders or sometimes your wrists, things like that. They say when you fall, you'll not automatically just catch your body, and like if your wrists there are not strong enough, then you're just going to hurt yourself, and then your body's just going to shut down from that. And I think what happens when people get into injuries is you either just close yourself off, especially I think if you've been so used to um, going really hard in the gym. I think when people get injured, it just completely shuts
Yeah.
them off, or they just discover this whole new world of actually working on their joints, and they come back even stronger. It goes back to taking ownership of your own health, and fitness is not just the way you look, but in the long term, you need to think about it as something like you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, basically. One thing that stuck with me, I was listening to a podcast with a flexible and range of strength, Lucas Hardy, and he just said, "There's no finish line. There's no finish line when it comes to training. Once you start, you're there for like the long run. And once you think of it that way, like it makes so much sense. You can have specific goals within that journey, but it's just never ending, is it? So how big you can get your muscles, yeah. You get to a point where like the results will be less and less each time. So then what is your next goal? Is it just going to be chasing that until you get injury or something like that? So
Everyone wants the big muscles, everyone wants to look a certain way, but like you're saying, once you've reached that, once you've achieved that, maybe that
yeah,
physique you want or the strength goal you want, then what? Maybe your goal then changes so that it's something more like enjoying life the older I get, or extending how I feel past my 20s into my 30s, into my
yeah.
40s, trying to feel the same way
Mhm.
by just looking after your body, because you can do it, with the nutrition advice and everything that's available just on the internet now. You can feel like you're in your 20s, well into your 40s, I imagine. I'm not there yet, but that's the goal for me anyway, right now, is build
Yeah,
a sort of
100%.
lifestyle, get the most enjoyment out of life as I can while I'm here.
Everyone has their journey and everyone has a process. I had my process, and I had to go through several things to kind of get to a point where I was like, okay, there's so much more to it than just like the way you look and things like that. And I think with people who are starting out, you can't just like automatically be enforce something that like is the right way, but you just have to understand that they have to go through their own journey as well. And you just have to be there for them. That's all. They're going to make their mistakes and they're probably not going to listen to you, but it's going to be ingrained in their head. And one day they'll remember what you said to them. They will remember, even if it's like 5-10 years down the line, they'll be like, oh, I remember Andrea. So tell them.
Yeah, one day it will click.
Said that. One day it will click. So I think it's just being, as a BD, being patient as well with like, you know, your clients, because ultimately you're working with them.
Yeah. As a PT, I imagine a lot of the time you get a request where it's like, I want to get abs. Because a lot of people, they want to develop their core, they want to look like they've got a six-pack. But talk to me about the benefits of core strength and like what are the benefits when it comes to lifting, when it comes to flexibility or any kind of athletic performance to having an actual functional, strong, bulletproof core?
In a day-to-day, you use your core, right? But I think it's also thinking of your core. I think most people just think of it as like, when I see videos on like Instagram and social media, it's like, oh, the best core exercise you weren't doing before. And it's just like it's partial range and it's just for stability. Most of it is just for stability, like an isometric hold and things like that. But it's just another muscle, right? It's another muscle that you need to try expose it through that full range of motion, because the abdomen just, you know, it stretches that way as well when ultimately your back extends. So in order to fully stretch it out, your back needs to extend, and most people aren't open to that, or they are afraid of that because it's like, oh gosh, like I'm extending my back, because it feels like sometimes like, oh my god, like this shouldn't happen, like I don't think this is normal, things like that. But over time, small exposures, it's getting into those positions as well when it comes to flexibility that ultimately will benefit when it comes to lifting and things like that. So let's say with a compound lift, if someone is used to that flexibility work, a bit of extending their back won't be such a big deal. Whereas someone who hasn't been exposed to that, and some minimal back extension with some load, oh, that's it. They just close off and they're against, oh, it's because I did something wrong, my back extends. Like, well, it could be like a lot of things, but exposing yourself to those ranges.
And guess what? Strengthening your core, that's going to help protect your lower back. That's one of the functions of your core, is to protect your spine and your lower back. So if you're someone who's scared of getting lower back problems, maybe working on your core is something you should be thinking about. One thing you said earlier that I just want to pick up on is you said a lot of the stuff you see on Instagram where it's like, 5 ab workouts that will give you strong core, 6-pack abs. A lot of them are very short ranges of motion. Now, I assume you're sort of alluding to sit-ups, crunches, all this kind of thing that typically you see people do, especially people who don't really know a lot and are just sharing what they think will give them abs, or what maybe people want to see because it looks quite good on Instagram. What would you suggest as some maybe more effective core exercises that people could be doing?
Well, right now I am doing straight leg lifts. I don't know if you've seen it, where I place my torso up on the bench and then have my glutes off the bench, and then I go up and down, and adding like a pad works really well because it gets a bit more extension on your back. But for example, you doing that on the floor, just like an ab crunch, but adding like a pad on your back to be able to get a little bit more extension on your back and getting a bit more range for your core and abs, then that could be like a progression from just doing them on the ground. So things like that. Oh, I think also working on your compression strength as well with your hip flexors and things like that, because I think some people just think of the abs as the chocolate bars, but it's a lot, isn't it? It's around, it's your hip flexors as well, and things like tuck holds or doing some tucks, then progressing in them to straight leg and things like that. Seeing more like the bigger picture on it as well, rather than just like, I just want to get some like abs. I think, of it like any other muscle you would. I think, I don't know who said this, but I can't remember who it was, but it stuck with me because so many people want the abs, and some people need to get very lean in order for the abs to be visible, right? But then someone said, imagine like your abs as little hills. If you train them effectively, the hill just gets bigger and bigger, right? And the less fat you have to burn for them to be visible. So if they're smaller, the more you have to burn for it to be visible. Well, the more you train them effectively and they actually grow, the less and you see them like sooner, like, which makes sense. And you see them with like people who do CrossFit, like their bodies are not like, some people are very like quite big and bulky, and they're not the leanest like people as well, but their abs are like, whether is there, and that always stuck with me. Like the hills, just train them to be bigger and bigger, and they were like, they'll come through,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have to be as lean as you think you have to be.
Yeah, great advice there. I think some of the people you see, or the athletes you see with the best abs, are gymnasts and people like that, or even CrossFitters. But essentially, people who, in their training, are taking their core through its full range of motion. And you notice that with a gymnast, or say a climber or something like that, compared to maybe a cyclist, someone who's hunched over all the time, might not typically have as good abs as a gymnast. If you looked at, on average, 100 gymnasts next to 100 cyclists. I don't know if that's a great example, but hope you see where I'm going with that. Now, Andrea, I've taken enough of your time, so I'd like to end with this. I think we're a very sedentary generation, and whether it's that's due to us having office jobs, or spending too much time sitting in front of TV, computer, gaming maybe, but we sit down a lot. We don't move a lot. I just want you to talk about like some of the benefits you found in your life of since you've really embraced this effort to get moving more and explore your full range of motion, what your body's actually capable of. Like, how does that feel now compared to maybe someone who doesn't move as much as maybe they should?
Just like you said, discovering what your body is capable of doing. Sometimes your goal can start out as like you just want to lose some weight, or you want to get those abs. But then once you start training and seeing what your body can do, that those goals over time, they start changing. They start changing into you wanting to feel better, you not wanting to spend so much time less sitting down or not doing anything. But I think then again, it's hard, because when you do those things, knowing what you need to do, it can be a hard place to get out of, because you start feeling guilty. I would say to people to not be so hard on yourselves, and start off with like baby steps. I don't know, looking 10 minutes less on your phone at the end of the day, because some people say, oh, just stop looking at it, just leave it. And it's a lot harder to do it, and it's easier said than done. But I find just baby steps, and once you do the small stuff, it just adds on, and making better choices. Or you're eating something and you're full, listen to that sign, and then maybe just push your plate away, have a little extra, like less chips, but still have them. So it's just baby steps. And I think so many people are hard on themselves, because people know what they need to be doing. But then again, I think it's find what you enjoy doing, and then if you can afford and you can invest into having a coach, someone that you feel that is going to listen to you and be empathetic towards you, then if you can do that and have the money for that investment, then I would 100% recommend doing that.
Yeah, find those little positive changes that can help enrich your life. And if it means maybe putting your money somewhere, like spending it on finding someone who can help you with that, then 100% worth it. Andrea, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. We've run out of time, but yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.